Puri. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told Sanatana Goswami, Maya Mukta Jivaranahi Swata Krishna Gyan. Jivere Kripaya Kola, Krishna Veda Puran, that the living entity won't come out of the material energy on his own. And no one likes to leave their comfort zone, do they? Very difficult to move anyone out of their comfort zone. No one likes change, even if it's a crummy existence. Even if someone has a crummy job, they live in a lousy house, still, they don't like to move on. Everyone likes to stay the same. I garden, and when I lift up rocks, sometimes I find living entities living under there, and I'm so sorry, so sorry. And then there's, no, leave us alone, we want to stay here under this rock. Everyone has a little rock in this material world, but there's a much bigger world which is full of bliss and knowledge, and Krishna comes to tell us about it. So Lord Chaitanya said, Maya Mukta Jivaranahi Swata Krishna Gyan. It's not swata, it's not automatic that a living entity will come out of the material nature and want to come back to him. Therefore, out of his compassion, his mercy for the fallen souls, Krishna comes as Veda Vyas, Veda Dvaipayana Vyas, and he compiles the Vedas and he makes sure that they're distributed far and wide so people can get sambandha gyan, or knowledge of their relationship with Krishna. It's out of special mercy. So there's a very special form of Krishna, the Shastra deity, that appears in this world in order to enlighten living beings. And if you go around and ask people their stories about how they came to Krishna consciousness, practically invariably you'll find that people have come in contact with these Shastra deities. Someone will say, I was minding my own business and all of a sudden someone came up, gave me a book, or one of my friends handed me a magazine, and when I read it, then it awoke my love for God. And so these Shastra deities are very special manifestations of Krishna's mercy. These books that are coming to us through the succession, and we can't take it for granted either, because they're written on paper and we think, well, there's bookstores everywhere and we can just get books anytime we want, but it's a very rare thing to have these special books like Bhagavad Gita and Sri Upanishad and Srimad Bhagavatam. Previously, books were all written by hand. They were written on palm leaves in India, and it takes a long time to write one book on a palm leaf, doesn't it? Or is it just me? Yes, it does. It takes a long time, and then you have to put it in the sun so it dries, and it's a whole process, and then you only have one book. But somehow, there's some good things about Kali Yuga, this technology, which is very disturbing, actually, everywhere we go. But it has some upside, too. One of them is these little chips, like Tribanga was showing me in his car. It's a little chip this big. He has all the Prabhupada's lectures and songs and everything plugged into his stereo in there. And we can disseminate knowledge very, very quickly around the world through this process. And books are still in vogue. People are reading books, and we have books through the BBT. Prabhupada made an arrangement so that we have these books to read and to distribute. And we'll talk more about his plan for having books, for having us read books, for having us pass on books to many, many other people. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to say, there's nothing lacking in this world except for Krishna consciousness. Do you agree? I mean, there's so many other things. There's so many comforts and amenities in life, but no one's becoming satisfied by those. So the International Society for Krishna Consciousness is especially meant for increasing Krishna consciousness all over the world. And when we disseminate literature, when we give people an opportunity to read the books, this has a systemic effect on society. And when people read them, they transform, and when they get out there into the mainstream of society, it changes people's minds and hearts and gives them a roadmap how to go back to home, back to Godhead. We met a Russian devotee, actually he's at our temple now, but he got a book some time ago, 2 years ago, and he started reading it. Before he met the devotees, he was chanting 16 rounds, following the 4 regulative principles, and all because he had gotten a book. And these are the great lifelines that we're putting out so that people can come to Krishna. So, there are many ways to distribute books. It's not that you have to go out on a street corner and distribute books, although that's not a bad idea. Anywhere you go, if you take books with you and you think of ways to distribute books, your mind and consciousness will be engaged in a very powerful kind of sadhana. This is the main reason that I think it's important to advocate book distribution. It's because when you go out to distribute books, you get superior strength and knowledge in Krishna consciousness. The difference between walking out the door with nothing in your hand and with a book in your hand is drastic. It's a big difference in consciousness. Once in New York at the Schermerhorn Temple, have any of you been there before? Schermerhorn? Bhagavata Shraya has. It's a big temple there with Radha Govinda in New York City. I gave a seminar there around Ratha Yatra about book distribution, and I was telling the devotees, wherever you go, you should always bring books with you. And I was taking a break from the seminar. It was a 2-day seminar, and I was walking out the door of the temple to have a walk, and I realized I didn't have a book in my pocket. So I was with a friend of mine, Vaisesika Prabhu. I said, Vaisesika, I just told all the devotees, don't leave the building without a book. I can't be a hypocrite, I have to go back. So he said, all right. So I went up the 3 flights of stairs, and I got a Sri Shapanishad, and I came back down, and then we took off on our walk. And we took a right on State Street, and then another right on Union, and just as I was turning the corner on Union Street, there was construction going on, and there was a very large Italian man, about 35 years old, leaning against his truck. He had been working, his clothes were soiled from working hard. They were doing some demolition on some apartments. And he looked at us as we turned the corner. We were wearing dhotis, and he looked at us curiously as we came around the corner, and we were just about 10 feet away from us. And he was looking me in the eye as I turned the corner, and he looks at me as we got close, and he says, "What are you, Buddha?" And what do you say to that? And then I remembered right when he said that, I got a book in my pocket. Because he was inquiring, he wanted to know. In his own New York kind of way, he was asking a sincere question. So I said, no, not exactly, but here, let me show you what this is. And I pulled out the Sri Shapanishad, which explains everything. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Prabhupada in his purport explains how all sense of incompleteness that we have in this world is due to incomplete knowledge of the complete. It's such a perfect book. It's so beautiful, it's so poetical, and just by hearing it you can become perfect. So I pulled out that Sri Shapanishad and I gave it to him. I put it in his hand and I told him a little bit about it. And I told him one mantra from that book. I said, one who always sees all living beings, one who always sees everything in relation to the Lord and sees the Supreme Lord within everything, never hates anything or any being. This was right after the 9/11 had happened and the World Trade Center had been knocked down, 2 of them. And people in New York City were understandably upset about it. I mean, they felt like anything could happen at any time. They might get bombed, they might get gassed, anything could happen. And they were very nervous and sort of untrusting about life in the material world anymore. And also very suspicious of sectarianism. So when I said, one who sees everything in relation to the Supreme Lord and sees the Supreme Lord within everything, never hates anything or any being. One who always sees all living entities as spiritual sparks, in quality one with the Lord, becomes a true knower of things. What then can be illusion or anxiety for him? What a beautiful verse. Completely non-sectarian. He heard those verses and I saw from his eyes and his countenance that he was attracted to this. He recognized, as a soul, he recognized, here's some knowledge. Here's something valuable. And this is an experience for me too. When I'm presenting to this soul standing there doing his work, and I presented something straight from the book, as he understood it, I was also gaining knowledge. It's an experience where when you give mercy, you get mercy. When you give knowledge, you also get it for yourself. This is the power of distributing knowledge. You know, in the Krishna book, Prabhupada says a brahmana, or a learned person who doesn't distribute his or her knowledge, is like a pot with a crack in the bottom. The water just runs out. But when you give and give and give, then you grow. The best way to learn is to teach others. And there's something intangible when you distribute this kind of knowledge to other people that grows in your heart and you transform. And it's because it's an activity that's very dear to Krishna and it's very real. And you get to see it for yourself. You get a front row seat to actually see what happens when you distribute real knowledge to another living being.